A certain woman flipped through a magazine, and a rare hint of excitement appeared in her cold eyes. "Hey, husband, look, we're on the same ranking list." A certain man raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, what list?" "On the world's top 10 list of women's dream lovers, you're number 1, I'm number 5. He has immense power, wealth, nobility, and is cruel and ruthless. She is free-spirited and unrestrained, carefree and independent, and has a cold and indifferent personality. He loved her so deeply that it was unforgettable, and she loved him so deeply that it went deep into her bones. The person she loved should have had a perfect life." The female protagonist was a special forces soldier in her past life, with strong martial arts skills that were beyond the realm of science. She was a fan of the entertainment industry, and there were male protagonists. Both male and female protagonists were equally strong. The ultimate favorite. 1v1 is clean both physically and mentally. Keywords of the novel. Exclusive crazy wife. My special forces wife no pop-ups, exclusive crazy wife. My special forces wife complete collection download, exclusive crazy wife. My special forces wife latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Saving a Beauty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Late at night, cool and light like water. A street in the eastern district of Huicheng has become lonely and deserted, not located in a commercial street. At this moment, there are no more people on the street, only a convenience store that operates 24 hours a day. The light is still solitary and white, complementing the dim yellow street lights outside the store, creating a bleak and desolate atmosphere like autumn water. A slightly chubby figure suddenly appeared from the side of the street and hurriedly rushed into the same deserted store as the street. This is a slightly overweight girl with a somewhat likable face. As soon as she entered the store, she took off the pink woolen hat she was wearing and said to a girl standing at the cashier, "Kishing, I'm sorry, there's something going on in the store over there, I'm late." She had a pleasing smile on her face, but there was a hint of disdain in her eyes, as if speaking casually. A girl named Kiso stood by the cashier, about 1.6 meters tall, with an excellent figure. She was wearing a white low-neck sweater, a thin gray knitted jacket, and tight jeans that perfectly wrapped her straight and slender legs. As she wore a red worker's hat, she couldn't see her true face clearly. Until she heard the girl's words, she lifted her head with a smile, revealing a somewhat delicate face. However, this face had a hint of heroism between her eyebrows and eyes, making people feel a bit handsome. "It's okay." With a gentle murmur, Mushing took off his employee hat and smiled at Zhao Ying, who was coming to change shifts, before leaving very decisively. "Goodbye, Zhao Ying." Mushing waved his hand at Zhao Ying. Zhao Ying took the hat and pretended to be friendly, saying goodbye to Mu Sheng. When Mu Sheng left the convenience store, her disdain was very obvious in her eyes, and she casually threw the hat to the side of the cashier. Kiyoshi, who had left the convenience store, rubbed his palm and let out a sigh, with a faint smile between his eyebrows. Zhao Ying has objections to herself, how could she not see it? It's just because the boss assigned her daytime work and made Zhao Ying work the evening shift. The salary for the evening shift is also a bit higher. Zhao Ying promised very happily at the beginning, but now she can't bear to blame her. At this moment, Mushing no longer had the warmth she had in a convenience store. She had a faint aura all around her, a cold and sharp feeling. If there were many people around her, she seemed to be able to easily attract the attention of others. Mu Xing looked at the time on her phone and found that it was past 8 o'clock and 37 o'clock. According to the original schedule, she should have finished work at 7 o'clock. Today, Zhao Ying delayed her by more than an hour. Mushing frowned a bit, unsure if he wanted to wake Zhao Ying up or let it go. After all, she wouldn't be able to work for a few days, and she was too lazy to waste her energy on someone unrelated. In an instant, Mu Xing suddenly remembered the past, and compared to the present, she had never imagined that her temper would be so indifferent. Could it be that someone who had died once really looked down upon everything? Kiso is not a true Kiso, she is reborn. More precisely, after her death, she took over someone else's body and was resurrected, while the original poor girl was actually infuriated by her own family members. Thinking of the past bunch of bad things, Mushing sighed. It's all over, and she doesn't want to think anymore. She just pities the girl from the original owner and died in vain. She is not someone who accepts adversity and should fight for the rebirth of the original owner the next day. The only thing she doesn't know is how to face that person at home, the mother of the original owner. I lazily thought about the past, but now that I have been reborn and taken over someone else's body, I must live well and have a wonderful life. God doesn't want her to die, how can she disappoint this kindness? Kiso has the same name as her former self, but most of the time she uses a different name, and no one else knows her real name except that person. The original owner was a girl who had already passed the college entrance examination and was eager to be admitted to a well-known university in Kyoto. However, she was not outstanding enough to waive tuition and miscellaneous fees, and her family conditions were not very good. The tuition fees needed to be earned by the original owner. This is also why Kishi worked in a convenience store. With the current Kishi, she didn't want to do that, which was too annoying and tiring. If it weren't for the fact that he had just been reborn and hadn't figured out everything yet, Kishi wouldn't have gone to a convenience store. Now that he has figured out everything, he will have to return a sum of money and naturally resign and leave. The weather in Huicheng has become extremely eerie these days. Although autumn is approaching quickly, it shouldn't be so cold. The late night is simply freezing. Kishi quickened his pace, and the dim yellow light stretched out her shadow. Waves of cold wind swirled into Kishi's neck, causing her to shrink from the cold. This day is really cold. Da-da-da-da. Suddenly, the chaotic footsteps of high-heeled shoes hitting the ground came from not far away. Mu Xing lifted his head and saw a woman in a black long windbreaker running towards her in a panic. Her dazzling seaweed hair shimmered with an unusual luster under the light, and her face was blurred by the darkness. A lewd figure was following behind the woman, with a short stature and a hunched body. It was obvious that it was a man, who was following behind a woman in the middle of the night. Its purpose was self-evident. Mushing frowned and was about to ponder whether to run away quickly when the woman had already arrived in front of him. Can you pretend to know each other and walk with me? The woman's voice was clear and deliberately lowered, mixed with immense panic. Mushing finally saw the woman's appearance and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. With such a face that harmed the country and the people, how big was his heart to come out alone at night. No wonder such a thing happened. A woman has a pair of watery eyes, with a clear black and white color. Her nose is straight and her lips are rosy, forming a stunning face. Especially at this moment, her panicked appearance is like that of a frightened small animal. In those big eyes, there is also a hint of forbearable strength, a contradictory in weak appearance. If it were a man, he would have long held her in his arms with pity. Unfortunately, Kiso is a woman. Could you please come knocking on her door? Originally, Musashi didn't want to take care of it, but looking at the extremely lewd appearance of the man behind her, Musashi felt that for the sake of her own visual senses, she couldn't see this delicate flower being ravaged by such a disgusting person. So, in her previous life and this life, Musashi did something good for the first time. She nodded, and the woman joyfully approached her. She took the initiative to grab Mu Xing's arm and said, "Thank you, my name is Hai Gu, and you?" Perhaps because she had support, she didn't panic as much as before. Wooden's body was a little tight, and the woman's faint scent came into her nose. It was as light as tea, not the strong perfume. It was tolerable, and Wooden relaxed. However, the sleazy man clearly refused to give up. Chapter 2. This brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is an area on the edge of Huai City, where there are not many people living. Therefore, on this cold night at 8 o'clock, the population is sparse and almost invisible. After finally meeting a beautiful woman, the sleazy man naturally refused to give up, and he also understood that these two women didn't even know each other. It must have been the woman who just called him up on the spot. It's just two women, the sleazy man thought for a moment, but decided to continue following. Just now, Mushing was originally in the opposite place to them, and his way home was also on the side of the sleazy man. Seeing this, Mushing still walked towards him with Hage. Hage's body trembled slightly. In such a cold day, apart from the windbreaker outside, she was only wearing a red dress, revealing her straight and slender legs. She looked a bit vulgar, but full of temptation. Mu Xing looked at her coldly. "Are you cold?" "That man is looking at us," said Kishi askance, while Hage shook her head with a pale face and hugged Kishi's arm even tighter. She lowered her head and buried it on Musashi's shoulder. If it weren't for Musashi's short stature, she would be over 1.7 meters tall in high heels, probably wanting to fall into Musashi's arms at this moment. Mu Xing rolled his eyes, afraid that he would dare to come out alone in such a situation. He didn't know what was going on in his mind. At this moment, they had already approached the direction of the sleazy man. Apart from being short and thin, the man's features also appeared sleazy, and his eyes were slightly slanted. No wonder he had fallen to the point of tracking women in the middle of the night. Mushing just gave him a diagonal glance, and Hage was too scared to open his eyes. As he passed by the person, the sleazy man suddenly looked around and saw no one. Evil grew from the edge of his heart and suddenly rushed over to grab Hage's arm. With a squint in his eyes and a flick of force in his hand, Musashi turned Hage's body in a different direction, facing the lewd man before quickly kicking him with his legs. With a loud bang, I couldn't even see Kiyoshi's movements clearly. I could only see the remnants of the lewd man flying out, hitting the street lamp and landing heavily on the ground, splashing dust. Looking at Mu Xing again, with a slight smile and frivolous eyebrows and eyes, when Haigu heard the commotion and opened her eyes, she saw the reflection through the street lamp. This girl who was holding herself with her arms looked carefree and unrestrained, with an indescribable charm. The faint smile made her feel as if she had been bewitched. At that moment, a word suddenly rose in Hage's heart: eternal charm. She didn't know how to use this word on a girl, but there was no sense of discord. Kishi had already let go of her stunned state and said, "All right, it's okay now." Hage finally regained his senses and saw a sleazy man lying on the ground screaming uncontrollably. His face was full of pain, and he covered his stomach with only a hoarse sound. Hage was amazed and took a step or two back, instinctively turning towards Mushing. "Next time you go out, you need to be more conscious. It's not always possible to encounter someone else around. I had an argument with someone else tonight, and it was a momentary impulse," said Kishi softly without explaining the situation. Hage's face turned red with embarrassment before Haigu could finish speaking. Mu Xing glanced at her. Haigu couldn't understand the meaning behind that glance. She felt a tremble in her heart as she suddenly approached and grabbed Mu Xing's hand, saying, "What's your name? Do you have a phone? I want to repay you." She felt a bit ashamed and lowered her head to cover up her nervousness. However, she heard Mu Xing's indifferent response: "My name is Mu Xing, I don't have a phone, so I don't need to repay. Also, I'm leaving, and you plan to stay here." Hage was somewhat disappointed with Kishi's answer, but she had no choice but to leave with Kishi first. Kiyoshi was a rare good person, so she managed to be a good person and sent Hage to a hotel in another bustling neighborhood. She was too lazy to ask why the other person didn't come home. On the contrary, Hage couldn't find out about Kishi's phone, so she left a note with her own phone number. Kishi didn't care, so she put the note into her pocket and left. As he pinched the piece of paper on the road, Kishi suddenly remembered that Hage had just proposed to give Kishi a monetary reward. Due to his style of behavior, Kishi instinctively refused. It was only then that he realized that he was no longer the same person as before, who never looked at the price when buying anything. This Kishi was very poor. Mushing pinched his face and sighed, let you pretend to be B, you deserve to be poor. Due to the incident with Hage, when Kishi returned home, it was already 9 p.m. When he knocked on the door, Kishi still heard the laughter and joy inside, as if there were still many people. Kiso was a bit puzzled, but when the door opened, she saw a strange girl. The girl is about 16 or 17 years old and looks very immature. She has a pretty good face and looks at Kiso with some confusion. Are you? Kishi hooked his lips and smiled, but didn't answer her. He walked straight into the house, and the girl behind him immediately wanted to stop her. Hey, who are you? Why are you sneaking into someone else's house? The already small living room was unobstructed, and as soon as Kishi walked in, he saw the cross-legged figure on the sofa, who had been wandering in Kishi's memory for a few days. Today, he saw Kishi's younger brother for the first time. The hairstyle is a bit cheesy, and it's popular among young people to have a messy and eye-catching head of hair that Kiyoshi can't stand. There are a few scattered strands in front of the forehead, which are very eye-catching. If it weren't for the exquisite face, it wouldn't be possible to hold this hairstyle completely. The feeling of being caught came from his arm, and Kishi glanced at the girl and said, "Do I need your consent to enter my own home?" The girl looked at her in surprise, as if she remembered something. She immediately let go of Mushing's arm and blushed with a hint of shame, saying, "Ah, are you Nanji's sister, Mushing?" The 17-year-old boy with crossed legs on the sofa waved at the girl with a nonchalant smile at the corner of his mouth and said, "Xiaowan, come over quickly." Why bother with her? The voice was hoarse with a period of voice change, but it was not unpleasant to hear. A girl named Xiaowan looked at Mushing awkwardly and walked over. Mu Nanji held Xiaowan in her arms with one hand and looked at Mushing provocatively. Xiaojuan's face turned red as if she was about to drip blood. She wanted to push away Mu Nanji, but when she realized that she had finally become Mu Nanji's girlfriend, she didn't have the courage. She just felt a little embarrassed in front of her sister. She looked up at Mu Sheng, but saw that she had already sat on the other side of the single sofa, her long legs casually overlapping on the coffee table, her arms leaning on the edge of the sofa, supporting her head, and casually asked, "Where's Mom?" Without even looking at them. Xiaowan was taken aback and looked at the other person's profile, only to realize that Mu Changji was somewhat similar to Mu Nanji, especially in terms of profile. More importantly, the way she nestled on the sofa had an inexplicable aura, with a hint of coldness and laziness, an imperceptible indifference. Her squinting eyes resembled those of Mu Nanji, but in terms of temperament, Mu Nanji couldn't even catch up. At this moment, Mu Nanji slammed the table fiercely, and Xiaowan, who was a bit distracted, was almost scared to pee. "You still have the face to say, 'It's so late to come back, no one's cooking, and Mom has to go out and buy me food.' Do you know how to ask?" 3, Chapter 3 Attitude Change. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Did you lose your hand? Or did you lose your hand? Mu Xing tilted his head, seemingly puzzled as he looked at Mu Nanji. His words made Mu Nanji furious. "What are you saying?" Mu Nanji roared loudly, her delicate and handsome face slightly twisted. Xiaowan knew how irritable Mu Nanji was, especially when he often heard Mu Nanji scolding his sister for being useless. She knew their sibling relationship was not good, but she didn't expect it to explode with just one sentence. Xiaowan sat with a stiff scalp, feeling a bit awkward. However, a corner of her eye lit up curiously as she glanced towards Mu Sheng. Didn't Mu Nanji say that his sister was weak and temperamental? Normally, his tone was so fierce that he was afraid of tears. Why is Mu Nanji now like a raging lion, sitting calmly on the sofa without any panic? Look, having a younger brother with low intelligence is really a headache. Since Mom went out to buy you food, don't you have hands to cook and eat it yourself? Even if you don't know how to make noodles, you can still make them, right? You don't even know how to boil noodles with water. Isn't that because you're useless? Mu Xing seemed to have a good temper and explained with warm words, but the words he said left Mu Nanji half angry. His heart became even angrier, and he didn't expect his sister, who had never dared to speak loudly, to mock him like this. Moreover, in front of his girlfriend, in a moment of excitement, he threw his phone heavily in his hand. Xiaowan widened her eyes in fear, not expecting that Mu Nanji would actually hit his sister. To her surprise, she didn't see how much Mu Xing was panicked. She just casually raised her hand, but it exuded a carefree and unrestrained sharpness. The thrown phone fell back in a lightning-fast manner, hitting Mu Nanji's forehead with a loud bang. Ah! Mu Nanji let out a scream and fell onto the sofa, covering his forehead. Sleeping slut, so handsome. Shocked by Qixi's actions, Xiaozhuan's first thought in her heart was actually this. She rationally called out, Nanji, and quickly rushed over to see her boyfriend's injury. Unfortunately. Qixi sighed as he looked at the lightweight smartphone that had fallen to the ground after colliding with Mu Nanji and dismembered him. Why isn't it Nokia? If you smash Mu Nanji, you can lie in the hospital for a period of 1 to 6 months. Mu Nanji's whole body stiffened, and he couldn't even scream while covering his forehead. Although he was still in pain, he twitched and squinted his eyes to look at Mu Xing across from him. This time she changed her direction and faced Mu Nanji, crossing her legs. Compared to Mu Nanji's carefree demeanor, she had a commanding and domineering aura. She wrapped her arms around her chin and smiled, brother, sister, it's been too long since I taught you to respect your sister as a younger brother. She spoke casually, but it always seemed to contain some ice debris. Mu Nanji, who was originally a bit angry, seemed to have been doused with ice water and immediately extinguished the blazing heart. However, she still stared at Mu Xing and said, if you dare to hit me, I will tell Mom. He didn't dwell on why today's Qixi suddenly turned so strange. After suffering some losses, his first thought was to move out his mother to suppress Qixi. Okay, she happened to be back now. You tell her, said Musashi with a meaningful smile as he looked at Mu Nanji. As soon as Mu Xing finished speaking, the door lock also clicked. A woman wearing a high-necked sweater with her hair tied up pushed the door in, and Mu Nanji and Xiaowan widened their eyes. Oh, Musashi, have you come back? Mu Changjing pushed open the door and saw the whole room staring at her, feeling a bit puzzled. However, when she saw another person on the sofa, she immediately became enthusiastic and angry, saying, why did you come back so late? Mom is so worried about you. Are you hungry? Mu Nanji was suddenly stunned. He pointed at the wooden student in surprise and said, You. He didn't say a word for a while. He just stayed on campus for 5 days and didn't come back, so this world has become so outrageous. On the contrary, Qixi waved his hand and said, I'm not hungry. The less grateful attitude towards Mu Changjing's concern completely angered Mu Nanji, who then exclaimed, Mom, she just hit me. The sudden roar startled both Xiaowan and Mu Mu. No big or small, she's your sister. You can't call her by name. Besides, what's wrong with hitting you? Hitting you is for your own good, otherwise there's something you've done wrong. Mu Changjing's words completely shattered Mu Nanji's worldview. It seemed that he didn't feel stimulated enough, so Musashi lazily glanced at him and said coldly, what are you doing so loudly? You scared the little girl. After she finished speaking, she glanced at Xiaowan. Xiaowan realized that she was talking about her. With an ah sound, she saw the frivolous expression on Mu Xing's eyebrows, and for some reason, her face turned red. Neither Mu Changjing nor Mu Nanji noticed her abnormality. When Mu Changjing saw her, she was very surprised and said, who is this girl? But after all, she knew in her heart that she was looking at Mu Nanji when she asked. Hello auntie, I'm Mu Nanji's classmate. My name is Yang Xiaowan, and you can call me Xiaowan, Xiaowan said as she stood up and exclaimed, I'm just a girl with less thick skin. She didn't see her because she only came after Mu Changjing left. After she finished speaking, she secretly glanced at Mu Xing again. Mu Xing was watching TV and didn't pay attention to them. Yang Xiaowan suddenly felt a sense of inexplicability in her heart. Oh, it's Xiaowan. Mu Changjing is not really foolish either. She didn't expose the ambiguous things between young people and smiled gently at Yang Xiaowan. Have you eaten yet? Auntie will cook for you. Ah, no need, no need. Yang Xiaowan looked at her phone and quickly prepared to leave. Auntie, it's too late, I need to go back. She still knew the right balance, and at this point, she should go back no matter what. Auntie goodbye, Mu Nanji. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Sister Nanji, goodbye. Yang Xiaowan ran to the door and said goodbye to the three of them one by one. Mu Xing lazily raised his hand and waved, goodbye. Mu Nanji was still sulking and didn't care about his little girlfriend's departure. After Yang Xiaowan left, Mu Changjing asked Mu Xing with concern, really don't want to eat anything. I remember your convenience store doesn't include dinner. Mom, I'm hungry, said Mu Nanji. As he was about to answer, Mu Changjing opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but still didn't say it. She just replied, okay, I'll go cook for you. She walked into the kitchen with a bag of braised meat in her hand, and Mu Nanji then looked at Mu Xing viciously, what kind of enchanting soup did you give Mom? His forehead was so big and red with scars that even his mother couldn't believe she hadn't seen it. It's really not good for him. Chapter 4. Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What kind of enchanting soup can I drink? Kishi smiled at him and said it was just a thorough brainwashing of Mu Changjing on Monday. The fate of the original owner was not good, and she was angry to death, to some extent, related to this nominal mother, Mu Changjing. The original owner, not to mention his intelligence, at least never needed his family to worry about his studies. Unfortunately, the family of the Mu family was not very well off, and Mu Changjing was a soft-hearted person, which led to the tragedy of the original owner's death. The original owner was a bit weak since childhood, not to mention being physically weak and sickly. At least she couldn't accept some basic physical training such as running and frog jumping, otherwise it would be very uncomfortable. Due to this reason, she didn't like physical education classes since elementary school. And this world is often full of strange things. Neighbors around the Mu family and residents in the same community often come to Mu Changjing's ears to blow a breeze. The general idea is that Mu Xing is weak and will have to marry out in the future, and dragging a sick body can easily drag down the family. It is better to give everything to his younger brother Mu Nanji. Mu Changjing is a soft-eared person, and over time, he believes it true and sees Mu Xing as a burden, becoming more and more demanding of her. Mu Nanji also looked down on her own sister horizontally and vertically because she believed outsiders. 5 days ago, the neighbor's long-tongued woman Wu Miaohua came to borrow money. At that time, before the divorce, Qixing's father left a sum of money for Qixing's 2 children. Qixing planned to use it for 4 years of college living expenses, and that money naturally belonged to Qixing. After Wu Miaohua learned about this, she belittled Mu Changxing's useless education everywhere. She tried to coax Mu Changjing and lent her the money. When Wu Miaohua found out, she knew clearly that with the virtue of the Wu family, she might not be able to get the money back, and her college living expenses were hopeless. In despair, she became angry again and suddenly fainted, naturally dying. In that moment, the current wooden creature was reborn, suffering from a high fever for a day. When she regained consciousness and received the memories of her original owner, she had a real confrontation with Wooden Changjing, refuting everything she had experienced over the years and scolding her. As a result, Wooden Changjing's attitude towards her changed significantly. Unfortunately, the deceased cannot be resurrected in the end. However, the original owner probably had no intention of surviving, leaving no sound behind. When Kishi received the memory, there was no resentment or unwillingness, just like watching someone else's movie. This little brother is also a fool. Perhaps due to the obvious disdain in Mu Xing's eyes, Mu Nanji was once again impulsively aroused in anger. This time, he couldn't control who caused the injury on his forehead. He rushed forward to teach Mu Xing a lesson. Although he didn't want to hit her, he must have pinched her hard to vent his hatred. But as soon as he pounced, he felt a flash of excitement in front of him. In an instant, a strong force pressed his head and sank into the sofa. There was a smell of leather sofa in his nose, and Mu Nanji's breathing became somewhat difficult. His hands and feet thumped hard, unable to break free from the constraints above. Mu Xing pressed down on Mu Nanji with one hand, rolled his eyes, and shouted at the kitchen, "Mom, don't cook for him anymore. There's nothing big or small, and you dare to hit your sister. Let's starve him before we talk." Upon hearing the shout, Mu Changjing came out of the kitchen and saw Mu Nanji struggling under Mu Xing's hands. She dared not speak up to stop him, so she responded with a sarcastic tone, "Then I won't do it for him." Mu Nanji suddenly stopped thumping. Mu Xing blew his nails, withdrew his hand, and looked at Mu Nanji, who was almost stimulated. With a leisurely suggestion, he said, "Muddy people have 3 different temperaments. You'd better go to the community to inquire about the current situation. Before, I used to see if you were young and sensible, but now it seems that even 17-year-old people should know how to respect their sisters." Mu Nanji rubbed his head and stood up straight. His originally arrogant bangs and hairstyle were now in disarray, and his face was a bit red. He looked at Mu Xing with resentment, then quickly ran back to his room and slammed the door shut. Mu Xing was too lazy to care about him, so he greeted Mu Changjing and went back to his room to sleep. Mu Changjing is a single mother. She divorced her husband when she was very young, so she changed the names of her 2 children to the same surname. She never looked for them again because Mu Nanji disagreed. Nowadays, Kishi doesn't have much feelings for her. It's not easy for Kishi to pull up 2 children, but the fact that the original owner was angry to death has always been a joke, leading to Kishi's lukewarm attitude towards Kishi. The next morning at exactly 8 o'clock, Kishi got up on time, and when he arrived at the living room, he had breakfast and didn't see Muninji. With his kind and friendly sister, Kishi asked, "Where is Muninji?" Mu Changjing, drinking congee, looks a little happy and pleased. "I got up before you. After eating, I went out for a run. I said that I was exercising." There is also a kind of pride in the words. "After all, I was used to my son, but now I unconsciously took Mu Xing for comparison." Fortunately, Mu Xing doesn't care. She just gave an invisible sneer. In the past, the old man used to sleep at home until 11 or 12 noon during holidays. Today, the sun was setting in the west, and it was likely that he got angry last night and went out to find someone to vent his anger. But she didn't say either, letting Mu Changjing immerse herself in the fantasy of, "My son has become so excellent now," and after finishing her meal, she washed up. She was supposed to go to work at 8 o'clock, but she changed her mind last night and didn't want to go anymore. She was too lazy to pay for a few days of work. Anyway, the borrowed money has been collected and she doesn't have to worry about living expenses. Even if she pays for the tuition first, she can still hold on for 2 years. 2 years is enough for her to find a good job. She went to Mu Nanji's room without any courtesy and brought his iPad out to play. When Mu Changjing came out to clean up, she saw it but didn't say anything. She even smiled and said, "Mu Xing, Mom can buy you a phone." She felt a bit guilty when she said this. Over the years, she had indulged her son in all sorts of ways, buying him all kinds of computers and iPads, while her daughter didn't even have a phone. Although the Mu family has a poor family background, it is not the kind of situation where they cannot eat enough or wear warm clothes. Even if they buy various electrical products for Mu Nanji, they can still make ends meet. However, having another daughter will make it difficult. Therefore, this poor family situation is also based on the perspective of Mu Xing. Okay. Kiso did not refuse, she did need a phone. At this moment, she finally came across a piece of news she was looking for, and suddenly, a major car accident occurred on the Outer Ring Expressway of the Magic City. A private car collided with two large trucks, crushing them into debris. The female driver of the private car died on the spot. Mu Sheng's fingers lightly stroke on the word death. Chapter 5. Go to Kyoto, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was almost lunchtime when Mu Nanji slowly moved back. As Mu Changjing had already told Mu Sheng to buy a phone in the afternoon, when Mu Nanji came back, he asked, "Nanji, will you go to buy a phone with your sister this afternoon?" Upon hearing this, Mu Nanji's expression became even more peculiar. Mu Sheng went to the kitchen to serve food, but ignored him. Mu Nanji didn't come back this morning. Of course, he didn't coax his mother to go running for exercise. Besides, it was impossible to run all morning. It was exactly as expected by Mu Sheng. He was angry and wanted to go out to vent. Unexpectedly, he heard the unexpected news. Han Qingyang, his playmate from childhood to adulthood in the community, mysteriously told him something. His sister beat up the Wu Miaohua family in the community. It is said that according to my mother, your sister went to ask Wu Miaohua to repay the money, and no one knows why she asked for it. Anyway, many people heard Wu Miaohua and her son's screams that day. In the end, Wu Miaohua reported to the police that your sister had beaten their family, but the later medical examination confirmed that there was no injury, and there was no surveillance video. The police had no choice but to force Wu Miaohua to repay the money. It is said that someone saw Wu Miaohua's son pulling your sister in. The words of the little partner really refreshed the three views of Mu Nanji, which is more profound than the stimulation brought by his mother. What is the virtue of the Wu family? Mu Nanji is very clear. The son of the Wu family is a gangster, a scoundrel, and ferocious. Wu Miaohua is a shrew. He moved from the countryside, and few of the family dare to provoke in the community. How can his elder sister dare to confront this family? Mu Nanji, who felt very dreamy, was unwilling to accept this reality, but after much inquiry, he had to accept it. It was true. Now that scumbag from the Wu family has been afraid to go back to the community for a few days. Wu Miaohua has been supporting her waist and saying that it hurts. The doctors have said it's okay, but she still cries out in pain. Is your sister really hitting or hasn't hit? At that time, many people in the Wu family heard the screams and thought it was time to hit, but there was no sign of the wound. She screamed. This girl from the Mu family, if she doesn't make a sound, she will do it. With a sound, she scared many people to death. Mu Nanji, who had obtained the truth, had a complex expression on his face. No wonder Mu Sheng asked him to go to the community to inquire. If he didn't come back in 5 days, the world had really changed. Remembering last night when I suffered 2 losses at the hands of the wooden animal, I don't know why. Although I still felt that my self-esteem had been hurt, I didn't feel much angry anymore, and even had a hint of curiosity. How did Kishi suddenly become so capable? This is also the reason why he had a strange expression when he returned home. Now that his mother has also been properly persuaded by her, Mu Nanji still wants to know what exactly happened. With this in mind, he pulled Mu Changjing into his bedroom to ask. Mu Changjing looked embarrassed and thought for a moment before finally revealing the matter of Wu Miaohua coming to borrow money. Unexpectedly, as soon as Mu Nanji finished listening, her face changed. "Mom, aren't you? The money that Dad left for sister, the money she used to go to college, you lent it to an unreasonable shrew. No matter how much he looks down on Kishi and thinks he's annoying, it's because he's related by blood and just a bit greedy for his mother's preference. But once something happens, he takes care of Kishi." Mu Changjing tilted her face, so embarrassed and ashamed that she couldn't even look into her son's questioning eyes. Her mind couldn't help but bend. After being scolded by Mu Sheng and Wu Miaohua's experience, she had already come to her senses and understood that it was her own daughter's own seed. She had been doing something wrong with Mu Xing before this. This is my mother's fault, so now she wants to make up for your sister as much as possible. Looking at Mu Changjing's shy and cautious words, Mu Nanji felt a bit depressed. He used to dislike Mu Xing because of his personality and desire for his mother's more attention. However, Mu Xing's attitude suddenly changed, and he felt a little happy and unsure of how to face it. Until Kishi's cold voice came. "Where did you all go after dinner?" The two of them awkwardly pushed the door open and walked out. Mu Xing stood at the dining table, looking at them lightly. Mu Changjing smiled and stepped forward to open his chair, saying, "Eat, eat, Nanji. Today is your sister's cooking." Mu Nanji said. She used to do it all at home. He immediately realized that it must have been since the Wu Miaohua incident that Mu Xing stopped cooking. No wonder last night Mu Changjing had to run out alone to buy food. Mu Xing's cooking skills are indeed impeccable. She has cooked a few simple dishes, including sour and spicy shredded potatoes, stir-fried pork with green peppers, pickled cabbage, and green cabbage round soup. Compared to the big pot rice she ate at school, Mu Nanji's desire not to live on campus has reignited. Delicious. While Mu Nanji was eating, Mu Xing suddenly propped his head up and looked at him with a look of anticipation. Mu Nanji was taken aback for a moment, and there was no need to lie about such things. He nodded honestly. "Oh. Eat more then." Judging from Mu Xing's appearance, he was a bit happy. Mu Changjing was also pleased, thinking that the two of them had finally become harmonious. He said gently, "Your sister asked you to eat more." Mu Nanji said, He always felt that Mu Xing didn't mean that. Kiso really doesn't mean that. In her previous life, she was a kitchen disaster. Even frying an egg could cause a fire. Now, her cooking skills seem to be innate and so excellent. She must have inherited the original owner, equivalent to picking up a skill for nothing. If those subordinates in her previous life knew about this, they wouldn't have been scared to death. After finishing his meal, Mu Changjing went to wash the dishes. Mu Nanji sat on the sofa with a twisted expression as if he had something to say. Looking at Mu Xing's hesitant expression, he couldn't bear to see his girlish demeanor and snorted coldly, "Speak up and let go." Mu Nanji's face turned black in an instant, and he stood up and angrily slammed the door and left. "Young people are always full of anger," said Kishi with a click as he saw the person run away in anger after washing the dishes. Mu Changjing came out to take Mu Xing to buy a phone. Without asking where Mu Nanji had gone, she picked up a bag and left with Mu Xing. "Just when I went out, I happened to meet Wu Miaohua on the opposite side. She was a fat middle-aged woman who could occupy 3 seats. Her eyes were small and her mouth was big. Her cheeks were like fermented mantou. It was greasy and disgusting. She had a long tongue. When she saw Mu Xing, she followed the ghost and hurried into the house." Upon seeing this, Mu Changjing shook her head. She had previously resented Wu Miaohua for causing this incident, but now she felt a little relieved to see the other party's fear of Mu Xing. Only Mu Xing glanced in the direction of Wu Miaohua's house, with a nearly invisible curve on her lips, and casually called Mu Changjing to leave. Chapter 6. Go to Kyoto, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mu Xing bought a smartphone for around 1,000 yuan, but she didn't intentionally choose the right one. Nowadays, the cost-performance of 1,000 yuan smartphone is also relatively high. Besides, she just used it to make a phone call and send a text message. After returning home, Kishi expressed her thoughts to Kichiyo. She wanted to go to Kyoto early, but Kichiyo was stunned for a while before nodding with slightly red eyes. Mu Xing frowned at the sight. She didn't mean anything, it was just that she could keep the sudden change in her temperament a secret for a while. It would be unrealistic to keep it a few months or even years away, especially since there were so many neighbors who knew about her previous situation. She could have used the excuse of almost being angry to death. After all, she had a high fever all day. As an excuse for a big change in her personality. However, after all, she was still the same person at heart, and it was impossible to completely change into another person. Even her lifestyle habits had changed. Taking advantage of this, before Mu Changjing and the others had any doubts, she wanted to leave first, reduce the possibility of Mu Changjing's suspicion, and let her gradually get used to it before speaking. After all, it is possible that this mother and this younger brother will be involved with him for a lifetime, and Mushing also wants to live a good life with them. He does not want to have any further worries. What if Mushingjing suspects that she is evil? Mu Nanji still loves reading novels, and he definitely reads rebirth novels as well. It's hard to guarantee that he won't have any wild thoughts, especially when it's still very likely. Before she was reborn, she also didn't believe in rebirth. Don't think too much, I just want to go to Kyoto and find a job to earn tuition fees first. That 30,000 yuan is at most enough for me to last for 2 years. I can give you money, said Mu Changjing in a somewhat hoarse voice as she wiped her eyes and gave a rare explanation. No need, I'm enough. Nanji is still in her sophomore year of high school, and it's time to spend a lot of money. I'm in college now, and I can support myself. Just take care of Nanji. Kishi wanted to explain, but she didn't think about how to explain in a roundabout way. As soon as she heard Kishi's somewhat straightforward words, she burst into tears and said, I know I've been sorry for you for so many years. Don't worry, Mom will help you earn enough college tuition no matter what. Kiso. She really didn't consider using Mu Changjing's money, and with Mu Nanji, she didn't misunderstand, but it's obvious that Mu Changjing misunderstood. In the afternoon, Kishi bought a train ticket for the next day to Kyoto. For the first time in his life, Kishi took a train and used to have planes flying everywhere. Taking a train for the first time, Kishi found it quite fresh. Mu Changjing actually wanted to book a plane ticket for her, but was rejected by Mu Sheng. The plane ticket was 1,500, and the train ticket was 450. Isn't it just 2 more days? We'll get through it slowly. Mushing felt that he used to not worry about money, but now he has reached a point where he can easily accept spending money everywhere, and his psychological quality is also quite good. While waiting for everything to be packed, Mu Nanji returned home at night and happened to have a family reunion dinner. Upon hearing that Mu Sheng was leaving, Mu Nanji remained silent all night. The next morning, when Kishi was about to take a train, he didn't let Kishi take him off. However, for the first time, Kishi woke up early again. He had intended to take Kishi off, but was killed by Kishi's one sentence. Sleep well, wake up and try to pass the next exam. Mu Nanji felt ashamed and angry. I won't answer your phone call. She then slammed the door back into the room. Mushing shrugged, she had no intention of calling Mu Nanji at all. I don't know if it's because Kishi wants to leave. The weather in Huicheng has warmed up today, and Kishi has changed back to a simple white tea outfit. When he arrived at the train station, he was still scared by the crowds in front of him. Everywhere is a dense queue of people, countless people shuttle with luggage, carrying big and small bags, which is completely different from the airport. This kind of scene can't even compare to sometimes encountering fans picking up celebrities. Kishi shook his head and walked into the hall of the train station carrying his luggage. As he arrived at the right time, Kishi's train had already started ticket checking. Fortunately, despite the large number of people, it passed through various checkpoints at a fast speed. Kishi pushed a suitcase and carried a bag of snacks, walking effortlessly. After passing various road signs, he found his own train. As he had booked a hard sleeper, there was no one in this carriage when Kishi arrived. The aisle was very narrow. When Kiyoshi found her bed, she saw that although the sheets on top were clean, it was obvious that someone had slept on them many times. She simply opened her suitcase, took out a new sheet made of wood and put it on top of it. Then, she put her luggage under the bed, jumped onto the bed, and lay down to play with her phone. She quickly managed to get this hard sleeper because the train on the second day of the last-minute booking had no tickets left. If it weren't for not understanding the situation when she bought the ticket for the first time, she would have missed the soft sleeper and even found someone else who had refunded the ticket. It would still be the lower bunk. Kishi felt lucky and a bit happy. She was the first one to come up, and shortly after, someone came up one by one. There were people in various shapes and colors who ordered train tickets. In addition to a slightly sturdy man, there were all ordinary young people and young parents with children in the carriage of Kishi. What's even more surprising is that there was a very beautiful young girl among them, dressed fashionably, but very quiet and not talkative. She happened to be next to Kishi's bed. The train began to start, and Mushing took out a packet of mint candy from the snack bag that Mu Changjing had bought for her. She didn't know if she was dizzy or not, she only knew to take precautions. Fortunately, she didn't feel any discomfort after the train started, except that the space was too enclosed and the smell was not very pleasant. At that moment, Mu Xing suddenly felt a scrutinizing gaze. She looked up and happened to see the head of the big man who had retracted from the upper bunk diagonally opposite. Kishi hooked his lips. How did she feel? This train trip shouldn't have been peaceful. The look from earlier seemed a bit ill-intentioned. Wah, 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 wah. At this moment, a piercing cry from the child rang out, accompanied by the helpless coaxing of the young couple on the lower bunk across from Kiso. Many people frowned, but fortunately it was still daytime, and everyone was not so concerned about the child's crying. The young couple seemed embarrassed. It took a long time to coax the 1-year-old child well. At this time, there was a voice from somewhere. It's really his mother Noisy. The voice was rough, wild, and thick. The young couple's face immediately turned red, but they didn't know where the sound came from. Mu Xing glanced in the direction of the big man's bed, paused, and then focused on playing with his phone. Chapter 7. Train Incident. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kishi finally learned the power of the train and drove continuously for 2 days. Fortunately, he will arrive in Kyoto tomorrow morning, although the time is not very good. The food on the train these past few days is really unbearable, because the cabin is getting stuffy, and she doesn't have much appetite. She drank a few bottles of water in the past 2 days and wasn't hungry at all, only ate a bucket of instant noodles. Due to the dull atmosphere, Musashi decided to lie on the bed all day. The young people in the car quickly got to know each other, but Kiso and the girl seemed a bit out of place. They hadn't said a word to anyone in the past 2 days. The big man had a very bad temper, and the people inside the carriage didn't say a word to him. The only difference was that the big man's gaze at the girl next to Mu Xing became increasingly disgusted. When passing by the girl's bed, he always accidentally bumped into her, and the girl probably noticed it. She didn't even dare to sleep at night, so she had to huddle inside the bed and take a nap during the day. Even so, probably because he was about to arrive, the big man couldn't hold his breath. Today, he wanted to touch the girl's waist while she was asleep. Those young people didn't dare to say anything when they saw it, because the big man was really fierce. Just as the train conductor happened to come in to sell something, the big man reluctantly withdrew his hand. However, the girl was startled and completely scared to sleep. Even if she was afraid, she just silently huddled in the corner and didn't say a word. At night, Kishi slept early, but because the train was not quiet, she didn't sleep deeply. She was vaguely awakened by a burst of crying. When she woke up, she could hear more clearly that the crying was from the girl next door, mixed with a faint cry for help. Please help me. Help me. The girl's voice was a bit hoarse. Kishi opened his eyes and they were facing each other head to head. With the dim light of the carriage, Kishi turned his head and saw the big man pressing on the girl's bed, tearing at her clothes. Although the girl was struggling, she didn't dare to be too aggressive because a sharp knife was pressing against her abdomen. The others were also woken up and didn't fall asleep, but no one dared to stop them. Two of them even huddled on the side, trembling and trembling. Obviously, no one dared to interfere with this matter. When Kishi stood up, a few people saw it and all looked over in fear. The big man seemed to have a feeling and lifted his head to curse at Kishi fiercely, "Mind your own business, or you'll be the same." He said this to increase his deterrence, and even gestured with a sharp knife at Kishi. The girl under pressure looked at Kishi with tears on her face and despair, with a hint of pleading that was about to dissipate. Mushing's eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold and imposing aura began to spread all over her body. Suddenly, she acted like a cheetah and lightning struck, tapping her fingers towards the man's wrist. For some reason, the man's hand became soft, and the knife fell weakly onto the girl's bed. When the big man didn't even realize it, Kishi's hand also wrapped around the back of his head and pressed heavily. With a duong sound, accompanied by the hollow echo of the metal bracket by the bed, the big man's head hit it straight, and the force made the big man rebound twice. He rolled his eyes, slid off the girl, and completely fainted. The whole carriage suddenly fell silent like death. A dementia-like murmur came from somewhere. "So handsome." Everyone nodded with lingering fear upon hearing the words. Just now, Kishi's movements were extremely graceful and neat, like making a movie. Unexpectedly, this quiet little girl was still a master. A reverence for the master rose in everyone's hearts, but when the atmosphere was not right, no one was busy worshipping the master. "Allow the big man to lie on the ground," and Mu Sheng looked at the time on his phone. It was 3:40. Suddenly, she lowered her curse and said, "I can't even sleep soundly." She had a grudge against this kind of thing. The sea song she met last time was also the same, and this time it is. "Just wake up now, anyway, you'll be in Kyoto by 5 o'clock. Kishi was about to close her phone when she suddenly saw a girl from the next bed clutching a blanket and frantically crawling over. When she climbed onto Kishi's bed, her face was still covered in tears that had not dried up. Seeing Kishi's indifferent gaze at her, she begged, "Can I sleep on your bed for a while?" Obviously, Kishi's behavior just now gave her great psychological comfort, and she now sees Kishi as her savior. "So I'll go sleep in your bed." Kiso has no cleanliness fetish, at most she doesn't like to get too close to others. It's a bit difficult for her to accept others sharing the same bed with her. However, as soon as she said this, the girl was about to cry again. I just want to sleep by your side." She was extremely afraid of encountering this thing. In this unfamiliar space, she developed a strong dependence on this girl she had never seen before, and more importantly, it was a form of psychological comfort. After a moment of silence, Musashi pointed to the unconscious man and said, "What do you plan to do with him?" "Definitely call the police." The young couple across from Kishi interjected, but the girl hesitated for a moment and looked at Kishi with a somewhat evasive expression. I don't want to call the police." "Why? Why don't you report it to the police?" Not only the young couple, but also other young people interjected and asked. However, Kishi clapped his hand and said, "It's just right, I don't want to make any mistakes. She's going to report to the police, maybe she'll have to follow her to the police station. Mu Xing doesn't want this kind of thing to happen on the first day he comes to the capital. As for what this girl thinks, it's her own thoughts, she can't control it." The others looked at each other and didn't speak when they saw that Mu Sheng was saying this. The girl finally slept on the wooden bed for a while, and before going to bed, she even said her name, Mo Yao, faraway Yao. Then, she grabbed onto the corner of wooden clothes and rarely slept. During this period, the big man lay on the ground in a coma. When the flight attendant came to check, he was still surprised and was blinded by Kishi's calm words, "I don't know, maybe I'm sick, so I like to sleep on the ground." There was no one inside the carriage who spoke much, but in order to avoid suspicion from the crew, they subtly explained the details of the incident. The crew immediately understood and saw that the person involved did not intend to investigate, making them even more lazy to take care of the matter. On the train, This kind of thing is not uncommon. Mu Xing's attack was 1 point heavier than usual, and due to the special location of the collision, it was certain that De Han would faint for a few hours. As for what would happen after the train arrived at the station, it was none of her business. After arriving at the station, many people chose to rest at the train station because it was still dark outside. Some of the family members who came to pick them up did not arrive. After waking up Mo Yao, Mu Xing got off the train on his own. Unexpectedly, Mo Yao caught up. Chapter 8. Follow her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are you doing with me? Mu Xing looked at the girl following him step by step, feeling a headache. Mo Yao, holding a large silver-white suitcase with long hair flowing and a pure and refined appearance, attracted a lot of attention. When she saw Kiso talking about her, she leaned forward with some excitement and said, "Is this your first time in Kyoto?" Mu Xing frowned slightly and walked forward, saying, "Yes. Me too." Mo Yao seemed a bit excited. "Let's get together, shall we?" Kiyoshi regrets his meddling for the first time. But in that situation, she couldn't ignore things, just didn't expect this girl to be so clingy. The girl also changed her silent image when she first appeared on the train. When Kiso agreed, she began to chatter incessantly, "I'm coming to Kyoto to study, so are you. We'll just come together. Don't worry, I can cook and do laundry, and I can do anything." The topic was very eerie, and Mu Xing couldn't understand what Mo Yao was saying to her about. He interrupted her and said, "Which school are you from?" "Peking Opera University." The school is different, but Kishi was a bit surprised when he heard it and said, "Do you want to enter the entertainment industry?" This Chinese opera university in Kyoto is quite famous throughout China, and almost all of its students are here to enter the entertainment industry. However, the most famous ones are those who host the broadcasting department, and the students who can enter Beijing Opera are among the best in appearance. When some big directors want to hire new talents, they mostly look for them from Beijing Opera. Therefore, those who can enter Beijing Opera are mostly related to their families. After all, there are countless people who want to enter Beijing Opera every year. Mu Xing looked up and down at Mo Yao a few times. In terms of appearance, Mo Yao must be qualified, especially since she is beautiful. In terms of appearance, she also has some discernment, which is easy to remember at a glance. She also has a rare and pure temperament like a lily, with a little bit of freshness added. Even if she doesn't get into the entertainment industry, a small fire is enough. The entertainment industry is a big dying vat, and this is not just a matter of hearing rumors from outside. In his previous life, he was not in a low position, and he also heard from those who were involved in it that, except for a few tough backstage celebrities, the most pure-looking celebrities you see are likely to be lured many times. In the entertainment industry, without skills and support, it's difficult to move forward. What can ignite, but what can be done with low means? Except for a few lucky ones who can suddenly become popular, how many lucky ones can be found? Mu Xing doesn't like the entertainment industry, but she's too lazy to persuade others. When Mo Yao mentioned the Chinese opera, her eyes were bright, indicating that she has this determination. Why bother to take care of her? Yeah, I want to be a celebrity. In Mo Yao's eyes, there was a hint of determination to win. Mu Xing shrugged and said, "It's a great ideal, but you don't have to follow me now. You haven't said your name yet, where do you go to school?" Mo Yao obviously ignored Mu Xing's words and asked after his name. Kiyoshi was somewhat unhappy, as she didn't like the way others were asking her. Just as she was about to speak, a loud noise suddenly came from ahead. They are currently walking towards the hall of the train station, passing through an underground passage. Although it is early morning, there are also many people in the underground passage, occasionally mixed with a few foreigners. It was very noisy, but the sound of an argument was clearly coming from ahead, and the attention of Kishi and Mo Yao was momentarily drawn away. A large group of people gathered around the corner of the road ahead, and a middle-aged man and woman were tearing and hitting each other head-on with red ears. The middle-aged woman was thin in stature, and the man grabbed her hair and scratched her cheek with one hand, crying loudly. Seeing this, before Mu Sheng could express himself, Mo Yao hurriedly pulled her over. "Don't worry about this kind of thing." Mo Yao knew that Kishi was very skilled, but she strangely didn't want Kishi to interfere in these things. Kishi turned his lips and said, "I'm not someone who likes to meddle in things. Even if Mo Yao doesn't pull her, she doesn't want to worry. Helping Mo Yao casually is always an accident, and she is not the kind of meddler who always gets involved in everything." As we arrived at the hall, there was nothing to say. There were many people around, and the lively atmosphere dispelled the lonely atmosphere completely. Mo Yao asked several questions about the school and name of Kishi, but even though Kishi was impatient, he still told her. Mo Yao, who received information from Mu Sheng, was obviously very happy. After waiting for a while, it was 6:30 p.m. when Mu Sheng and Mo Yao searched for a bus to the city together. Kyoto is very large, but it is not far from the train station. The schools that Mu Sheng and Mo Yao attend are located in the same place, which means that Mu Sheng cannot temporarily get rid of Mo Yao. Transfer from the city center to the famous central area of Huayang district in Kyoto, where the school is located. In the car, Mo Yao asked Mu Sheng whether to live on campus or rent a house outside. Mu Sheng thought for a moment and realized that the school would start in a month or so. Why not find a place to live and find a job, work and study, to barely support himself? It should be enough. Upon hearing this, Mo Yao immediately became happy and expressed that it was possible for two people to rent together and share the rent equally. This can indeed make the rent cheaper. Anyway, it's for sharing rooms, and after thinking about it, Kishi agreed. The market price of houses in Kyoto has always been sky high, and renting a house is the same. But who made this Kyoto? There are many houses near the school, but most of them are in the school district. Most of them have been bought by wealthy parents, and the rest are also expensive and not to be avoided. The two of them have already figured out each other's situation and are not very wealthy. Of course, Mo Yao is obviously a bit richer than Mu Sheng. In total, the two rented an ordinary apartment in a community a few blocks away from the school. This is not a very bustling place. It's just an ordinary 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 1 living room. Even the 2 bedrooms combined are the size of a school dormitory, and the living room is probably only twice the size of 2 bedrooms. The monthly rent is 1,500, not including water and electricity bills. After all, this is still considered a half-city area, and renting a house like 1,500 is still because the landlord said that paying it in one go for 6 months would reduce the cost by a few hundred. Yes, from the beginning, Kiso had no plans to live on campus, and Mo Yao didn't know what he thought, so he agreed. I paid half a year's rent and advanced 500 yuan for living expenses, because Mo Yao said that she is responsible for cooking on weekdays, saving a little effort and making Mu Sheng happy. Although Mo Yao insisted on not charging money, Mu Sheng still advanced some money for her. After all, she has no habit of taking advantage of others. 30,000 yuan suddenly cost 1/6, and Kishi expressed some sadness. Chapter 9. A Place to Stay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. 10. Chapter 10 Work, Network Management. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At noon, Musashi once again experienced what it was like to be so skilled in cooking that she was so captivated. Never before, she felt that someone could make something delicious that she could swallow her tongue. Taking the initiative to ask, Mo Yao told her that the ancestors of the Mo family were all famous chefs, and there was once a generation who was still a royal spoon chef in the palace. However, in the generation of Mo Yao, her father did not love cooking. On the contrary, she learned her grandfather's cooking skills by herself, but she still wanted to enter the entertainment industry. After listening to this, Mu Sheng could only sigh. She felt that with Mo Yao's cooking skills, why bother not become a generation of famous chefs? Why do you have to enter that chaotic entertainment industry? It's just her initial idea. She won't intervene in other people's affairs. She can help Mo Yao, but she won't force her to change Mo Yao's thoughts. In the afternoon, after finishing his meal, Mu Xing went to look for a job. Mo Yao was afraid of the heat and didn't want to go out. He contacted the people from the telecommunications bureau at home and asked them to come and pull an internet cable. When Mo Yao came, he also brought a laptop. The landlord had internet, but it looked like he couldn't bear to pull it together, and the internet speed was probably not fast. It was better to go and pull it himself. In the afternoon, Kyoto is still extremely bustling. This is not the city center, but Huayang district is also a quite famous place, with a level of liveliness and prosperity that is no less than that of Huaicheng. Kiso was wearing a simple red-letter T-dot shirt, with straight and slender legs exposed under her shorts. She wore an orange sun hat bought by Mo Yao, which concealed her face and made her look no different from the girl on the street. On both sides of the bustling street are rows of various shops, some high-end and grand, some small and exquisite, while others appear narrow and dirty, with uneven levels. Some shops have recruitment notices posted in front of them, and upon inspection, it appears that they are all jobs that are not suitable for her. Anyway, there is still a long afternoon left, and she is not in a hurry. She casually looks at each store. The street bypassed one after another, becoming wider and more crowded. As she walked lightly, Mu Xing's forehead gradually oozed fine beads of sweat. The air conditioning in the shops on the street hit her face as she passed by, and the alternating feeling of cold and hot made Mu Xing feel a bit uncomfortable. Just as she was about to find a cold drink shop to sit down and rest for a while, she suddenly saw a recruitment notice, and her eyes lit up. This recruitment notice is posted at the entrance of an internet cafe, with the words urgently looking for 2 internet administrators with a monthly salary of 3,500 and no rest days, including free meals and accommodation. This condition is considered favorable, but there is no rest day, which is a bit harsh. It's just that Mu Xing doesn't care. This job is quite suitable for her. This internet cafe is called Emperor Style, and the exterior decoration is not too unusual. When Mu Xing enters and takes a look, the layered pearl curtains and screens separate modern computers, creating a unique atmosphere. Especially with the large space, the sound is dispersed very widely and not so noisy. The decoration is quite creative. At first glance, there should be at least 300 computers on this floor, and each one doesn't look ordinary. The headphones and keyboards are all the most popular game-specific sets at the moment, which the internet cafe owner is willing to accept. But judging from the bustling atmosphere in this hall, one can tell how good the business is, and the money will soon be earned back. The paid bar counter is located on the right side of the entrance, sitting on a marble tile paved stone platform, somewhat resembling a bar counter. 2 people behind the bar are burying their heads playing with computers, a man and a woman. Behind them are 2 freezers, inside which are bottles of cold drinks. There is a large shelf on the right, which is filled with common snacks in the market, and there is also a small cabinet with cigarettes. When Kishi passed away, the girl looked up with a feeling and said, "ID card." The girl's voice was very calm, with a hint of habitual numbness. She shook her head and said, "I don't go online, I'm applying for a job as a network administrator." The girl was somewhat surprised, and the boy next to him also raised his head, showing a somewhat rebellious face. Applying for a network administrator. Kishi nodded, and the boy looked at him incredulously. Then he picked up the landline in front of him and dialed a phone number, saying, "Hello, third brother. Someone is applying for a network management position below, right. Hey, good." He hung up the phone and glanced at Mu Xing, saying, "Wait a moment, my third brother will come down right away." Kishi nodded in response, and at that moment, the girl looked at her for a while and finally spoke out again, "Are you an adult?" "I must have reached adulthood, I brought my ID card. Oh, you're going to be the network administrator on the second floor, not on the first floor. Think carefully about what's going on the second floor. Before she could finish speaking, the boy next to her suddenly poked her arm and gave her a glare. The girl shrunk her neck and didn't say anything. Mu Sheng's eyes narrowed slightly. Is there a problem on the second floor? But she didn't ask, just didn't wait long. Suddenly, a handsome boy came down from somewhere, with a fierce and evil aura on his face. He walked over and noticed Mu Sheng, and after a while, he said, "Are you applying for a network management position?" Mu Sheng nodded again, and the boy quickly turned around, saying impatiently, "Then come with me." Mu Sheng followed him up and realized that there was still a second floor of the internet cafe. It seemed like a big internet cafe. I only realized on the second floor that the environment on the second floor was much better and more spacious than on the first floor. At least Kishing couldn't see the edges at a glance, but the density of machines was higher than on the first floor, so there should be many more machines than on the first floor. But what sets the second floor apart from the first floor is that the internet is mostly filled with groups of young people wearing black or white vests, with their hair dyed in various colors. At least, Kishi saw the hair colors that she had only seen in magazines from all the models, and her hairstyles were quite unique. Kishi felt that some of the bald ones were more pleasing to the eye at first glance. This atmosphere is not good, and the girl who feels sad will say there is a problem on the second floor. Zhao Junjie turned his head and saw Mu Sheng looking at the situation on the second floor, but his face remained calm and his heart was a bit peculiar. Seeing that she was not dressed like a delinquent girl, he was rarely interested and said, "Do you really want to be a network administrator?" He thought bringing her up would scare her away. "I don't want to come in and do something," said Kishi, looking at him inexplicably. Zhao Junjie's face stiffened and he snorted coldly. "If you think it's okay, let me tell you the situation. Our second and first floors are separate, and you need to be responsible for the second floor. You don't need to worry about the first floor." Before he could finish speaking, a few loud whistles came from the bar on the second floor. Yo, Junjie, where did you hook up with the girl? She looks quite agile.